Right, so the zero factor property states that if A times B is equal to 0, then A will be equal to 0, or B is 0, or both. Both are 0. So basically, when you factor something, you're able to solve because when you have something times something equal to 0, one of them has to be 0. So we use this idea to solve pretty much all quadratic equations. So let's pretend it's already factored. Let's say d plus 7 times d minus 19 is equal to 0. Since it's factored, you have some a times some b, just some term. So you set each one equal to 0, right? You guys remember doing this? Then after that, you just isolate the variable. So we will subtract 7 on both sides, or you can think of it as moving it over, however you want to think about it. And move the 7 becomes negative. I move the 19 becomes positive. That makes sense, the basic idea. So x squared minus 9x is equal to 0. So then it's not factored, right? You don't have something times something, so you have to factor. So from now on, whenever you solve quadratics, first thing you do is factor, okay? So on this guy, factor the common GCF. Pull out an x, I'm left with x minus 9. So now I have something times something equal to 0, so I set the first piece and the second piece equal to 0. This guy's done, so solve for x here. Move the 9 over by addition, and it's positive 9. So we have two answers. So you put both of these guys into the answer box. All right, let's try to do something more difficult. Okay. Next question. M squared plus 22m plus 120 is equal to 0. So now all the factoring stuff we did in the last few sections is going to be very helpful. So what are factors of 120 that add up to 22? So we know the first part would be something like this, because it's m squared. And everything is positive, so everything needs to be plus here too. So then, if you're not sure by looking at it, you should factor the constant. So 12 times 10, 2 times 60. What else? 20 times 6. And then we'll add them over here. The sum will be 12 plus 10 is 22. 62, 26. There's still a bunch more, but I can already see that this is the one I want. It's going to be plus 12 plus 10. So if you're comfortable with factoring, this section shouldn't be too bad. If not, you'll keep practicing the factoring. So now something times something is equal to 0. So set each of these equal to 0. So then this will be -12 and -10. If there are any questions on these first three? So on these types of questions, you have to first get everything to one side before you begin factoring. So what you got to do is move everything, basically keep the x squared part positive and just move everything to that side. So I'm going to move these two to the left. So subtract them over, or move them over. As soon as you cross the equal sign, just change the signs. Or you can just show the subtraction step, that's fine too. So now we have to do AC method. So A times C is equal to 5 times -12 is equal to -60. Factors of -60 that add up to -11 is what we want. So let's see, 6 and 10, 6 and -10, that doesn't work. What else? 5 times 12, right? And that doesn't work. 4 and 15. There you go. -15 and 4 is the one we want. If we sum them up, we'll get -4, 4, 7, -7, 11, and -11. So we're going to use this guy. Okay. So remember last time we said we use these to break down the center term, to create grouping. So everything stays the same except the middle. So we will have -15x plus 4x minus 12. So the center term became those two. So we did last time. So now, let's factor these guys. Factor these two. Factor the x minus 3. And then we'll have 5x. That should be, oh, that's right. This is wrong. Sorry about that. That's a 4. 5x plus 4. Do you have any questions on that AC method from last time? Okay. So then once it's factored, set it equal to 0. Add the 3 over. This guy will take a couple steps. Subtract the 5, then divide by 5. So x will be -1. So our two answers are 3 and -1. We won't always have three answers, or sorry, two. It could just be one or none, depending what's going on.
Question, how did you get 5x plus 5?
5x plus 5. Oh, you're right. That should be a 4. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, that was a mistake. Well, let's redo that part right here. Thank you. So that's a 4 to the -4. -4 divided by 5 gives you a -4 fifths. There you go. Okay, let's move on to a different way to solve these guys. This time we'll solve by the square root property. Okay, let's pick a good one here. X minus 2 squared equal to 4. So square root property says you can square root both sides, and if you see that they're both squares, that's usually a good time to do it, especially something like with an x on it. Okay, so the square root of both sides here the only difference is you need to add plus or minus to the 4. So whenever you do square root of both sides, you add plus or minus to this side here. So that creates two different answers. So we're going to have to add the 2 over, and we have two situations. We have 2 plus or minus 2. So I'm moving this 2 right here. So it looks weird, but really it's just saying what? X is equal to 2 plus 2, x is equal to 2 minus 2, which is really just 4 and 0. So if you just look at it separately, it's not a big deal. Just don't forget the plus or minus. Okay. Let's do one more of those just in case. So solve using the square root property. So same deal. Square root both sides. So here we go. It's just when you do the right-hand side, tack on that plus or minus. Then that leaves you with 2x minus 3 equal to plus or minus. Root 45 can be reduced because it contains a squared factor. 45 is 9 times 5. So you will deal with that 9. So a 3 will come outside. 3 times root 5. So now, solve for x. Just leave this as plus or minus. Don't let it bother you. So I'm going to add the 3 over, giving me 3 plus or minus 3 root 5. Divide by 2, and we're done. Just you have to divide the whole thing by 2. Are there any questions about this problem? Does that make sense? So what they did was solve this guy in general terms, which gave them a formula, and since they use a general form, they can use this for any example. So this is a specific example, general example. Then just plug in the numbers here. So we're not dealing with x, but m will be equal to negative b, right? Plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4 times 1 times negative 3. Okay. Then m will be negative is a 2 plus or minus square root of negative 2 squared is a 4 minus, then do these at once. Negative 4 times 1 is negative 4. Negative 4 times negative 3 is a positive 12. 2 times 1 is a 2. So then just combine stuff and we should be pretty much done here. So that will be 2 plus or minus the square root of 16 over 2, which will be 2 plus or minus 4. Square root of 16 is 4. At this point, you can start factoring things, because technically there's a 2 in common up top. So what you could do is factor a 2 from the top, leaving you with 1 plus or minus 2, right? If you factor 2 from these two guys, 2 will be out here, so then you cancel these 2's. So your final answer would be 1 plus or minus 2, which gives us 2 answers. So m is equal to 1 plus 2, m is equal to 1 minus 2. So as you can see, the quadratic formula is a little bit more work. So only use it if you can't factor at all. You guys have any questions on quadratic equations?
Yeah, I think if you could go back to that step where you plugged in the -2. So we're saying m squared would be a, right? And then 2
Yeah.
b, and that's how you
Yes.
got 2.
Yeah, the a is 1. There's nothing there. B is the -2. C is the -3.
Okay.
So then that B goes here, right? See how that minus is built in?
Mm-hmm.
So we got double negative there, and then B squared, so we just square whatever the heck B was, minus 4, which is built in. A is 1, C is -3. They're all coming from here.
Okay. And then at the bottom where you factored the 2 plus or minus 4 over 2, and you got 2 times the 1 plus or minus 2 over 2, how did you get to 1 plus or minus 2?
So do you see how we factor out a 2 from the top?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so these 2's will cancel. So I no longer have these anymore. So I'm just left with the inside. 1 plus or minus 2.
Oh, okay. So the 2's wouldn't cancel. You're factoring by the 2.
Yeah, you can't cancel anything unless you factor something. So I factor the 2 from the top. Then I cancel these 2's here. You could have also added these. You could have done 2 plus 4 is 6, divided by 2, which is 3. 2 minus 4 is -2, divided by 2 is -1.
Okay, yeah, I think that's a little easier for me to understand that.
So you can do it that way, it doesn't matter. But since we're factoring a lot in these sections, I want you to be comfortable factoring in general. Don't let it bother you if you can. Okay, that's it for 1-7, I think. Take a short break while I decide the next section. It's 6:49, I guess. Come back at 7. Should be good. This is your XY plane. First one will be here. Second is this way. Third. And so where is -5, 3? Which quadrant? So some points are 2, 3, 5. 1, 2, 3. So that would be somewhere over here, right? So at this point, x, y is in quadrant 2. 0, -7 is actually right on the line. 6. So when this happens, you just say it's on an axis. So quadrant 1 on y-axis. So the chapter, or 2.1, starts off pretty just asking plotting points, or can you tell me that? And they'll ask stuff like this. Graph the equation (3y plus 6x equal to 9). Since we're in business math, I'm not going to force you to do this by show you. Graphing programs. So let me share this with you. This is just the Desmos website. I'll send you a link in a little bit. You used it before. Let's just plug it in. So it'll be 3y. And if you don't have the graphic calculator, so just use this. Equal to 9. So graphic width. Too bad. Just have that 0, 3. Other one. 0, 3. Y-axis. So something. So whenever you're finding intercepts of any function, doesn't matter, you start by doing this. Plug in a 0 for the y, solve for x. Plug in a 0 for the x, solve for y to find the y. That does not mean that there will be an intercept. Sometimes there isn't one. But this is how you attempt to find them. So for the first one, I just put 1 on it. I'll let y be 0. X would be 3. X be 0. Subtract 3. Divided by 2. Negative 3 halves equal to. Although the calculator should be able to show you that anyway, but just in case, it's not easy. Let's try it out. So x equal to 2 plus 3. There is one intercept. So we found it. When y is 0, intercept. So 3 comes y intercept. 0 comes. Go to the y-axis, touching the x-axis, so that's the carrot. Touching the y-axis. So technically, we don't need to solve it by hand. I just want to show you just in case. So you're allowed to use this on your tests or your graph. It's pretty much the same thing. And it's just basically graphing. X. So equation again. This time it is quadratic. So since we're using a graph, it should be pretty easy. Let's test it out. Remember, it's always making sad.
So I'm plug in your options. So here's the should know that drag equation should be zoom out. See my x-intercepts and my y-intercept. So the answer would be x-intercepts -2, 0, and 3, 0. Y-intercept only have 1, 0, -6. So once you have this information, you should be able to do a sketch, right? That's good, especially since we have it there. So just plot the intercepts. You should be good. Vertex would be the last piece that we need. The graph set it. So -2, 0 is right here. 3 there. Y-intercepts right. The other guys are some sketch. So on an exam, if anything asks you to graph, you can use your calculator. Just give me a sketch. It's okay. It's good enough. So as soon as you start, so you know what? So I'll call the first one x1, y, x0. Second point is x2, y2. So now you should know where everything goes for the formula. So you go y2 is y1, x2 is x1. So just plug it in, and just remember these signs are built in. Leave them there. So y2 minus y1, x2 minus x1. Double check that. y2, y1, x2, x1. So -11 plus 1, -4. Let me show what worked there. That'd be -11 minus -1, which is +1. And the 0 doesn't do anything, so that's done. -11 plus 1 is -10. Negative is equal to a positive 5, 2. Okay. But let's define slope in more detail. So as we said, it's equal to this formula, right? It's also equal to your amount of rise over run, which is also the change y over change in x. So visually, this means that the slope that goes, the line will be going up 5 and over 2. Get a visual. Let's say 3 over 2. So look at this line here. The equation is 3/2 x, right? So start at 0. Start at any point on the line, and then use your slope. So I go up 1, 2, 3. Here's 1, 3 over 2. So I end up at 3 over 2. So keep landing on this line here. I'll also go backwards by using negative 2. Sorry, go backwards. Rise over. So rise is negative, down 3. The left 2, down 3. So 2. So you'll keep landing on the line. Okay. Visually, that's what the slope does. Okay, through it. So no lines always have defined slope. Horizontal lines will always have slope 0. So you'll run into some of those when you try to find m and it turns out to be 0. Right, let's do something else. Find an equation of the line with the given y-intercept. And slope m. So here we go. So for the y-intercept, I'll just go earlier. So So remember, y-intercept is a point. So it'd be better to write it as a point if the question doesn't give it to you as a point. So it's clear. So y-intercept of 4 means that you have a point y-intercept of 4 means the line goes through 0, 4. So we can use the point slope form because you have a point and you have a slope. So this equation up here, the first one, will be the easiest one to use. You don't have to use that. When you have these two, that's easier. So since f slope we have x1, y1, this is 0, 4. And there's 7. That would give us a y equal to m7 times x minus. So give us 7x, which is going to be y equal to 7x plus 4, which is at 4. So we have it in a standard form. They'll ask you to form it. So on the right underneath the answer box in your homework, they'll ask you. They'll say slope intercept form, standard form. This is slope intercept, which is the note I just remembered. Should write slope intercept. So they give you a 2 comma m equal to negative 3/5. Remember that 2 means y-intercept is 0, 2. Slope is m equal to negative 3/5. So let's use that same formula. Y minus y1 equal to m times x minus x1. Plug in 0, 2. Plug in the slope. Plug in the x. At that point, you just solve for y and you're done. So we can supply the 3/5 in. That will leave you with this guy. Add the 2 over, and we're done. So this right here is point slope intercept. you're going to do is solve for y here, and you'll have the slope automatically and the intercept. So let's subtract the x over. So that'll be 4y equal to negative x plus 8, then divide by 4 everywhere. That gives y equal to negative 1/4 x plus 2. So when you have 4 on the bottom, you can always rewrite that part as a 8 divided by 4 is 2. So the answer would be m, negative 1/4, and y-intercept b is 2. So, are there any questions on finding the slope intercept given an equation? So the last one, and we'll move on to a different section. Find the equation given 2 points. Negative 1, 1, and 416. So basically, you need to find the m and the b will be done. So the m, which is used the usual equation formula, find that guy. And once you have that, you plug in the m, and then plug in a point, and you can solve b. Or you can use the point slope form. It doesn't matter. So the x1, y1, x2, y2. So m will be y2 minus y1 over x2 minus x1.
So before, in front of the 4, what is that at the top?
Here?
Yes. What's the to the?
Yeah. The top part. That is a 4, 16. Top x2. Sorry, kind of just jammed. So then just use the formula here. y2 minus y1. So that would be 16 minus 1. x2 minus x1. So that'll be 15 over 5. Negative, negative, 4 plus 1. 16 minus 1, 15. The slope of 30. So now that you have a slope and you have 2 points, you can use the point slope form and find that equation. They want the equation of the line, so that will be this one. So just plug in. Plug in any point, doesn't matter which one. I'm going to use the number negative 1 and 1 just because they seem to be easier to use. So y minus 1 is equal to 3 times x minus negative 1. It's x1. That will give us x minus 1 equal to 3 times x plus 1. Space, right? Distribute the 3, and we'll give you 3x plus 3. Add the 1 over. That will give y equal to 3x plus 4. This will be equation 1. So you can find an equation of y given point and slope for 2 points. That's the minimum that you need to give. Otherwise, you cannot find it.
So as long as the arrow is pointing at the same thing, it will remain consistent. So x, the smaller one, pointing at the smaller guy, x less than 2. 2 is still bigger than x. It's a different perspective, right? Now, if you were graphing this in one dimension, you would say, draw a number line. Put a 0 right there. 1, 2, 3, whatever. Doesn't matter. What matters is the 2. 2 will be a parentheses going this way. So real quick, this is parentheses. Bracket would be, oops, sorry. The next one would be bracket. If you put the equal to underneath, then you use this on the graph. Okay. So for example, if you had x is less than or equal to, let's pick a different number for fun. Say 4 in one dimension. The graph would be 4, and then you put a bracket here. So I'm including the 4, and then everything below. This guy up here starts right below the 2. That's the difference. Okay, so less than is right below. So like 1.99 is included, but not 2. This guy includes the 4, and that's exactly where the cutoff starts. Okay. So now let's go over integral notation, just in case you forgot. Write the inequality in interval, oops, notation. Okay, so -1, -2. So if I were to put a bracket here and a parentheses here, and I included everything in between, right? the question will ask you to write that as an interval. So you would just say bracket -3 until 7 parentheses. Right, so this means include everything in between, but stop before 7 and cut it off at -3. Okay. That makes sense. Now, as a inequality, you would say that x, so this is, let me write the note first. Interval notation here. The inequality would be x is between 7 and equal to, so whenever you see these symbols, that means that x is between -3 and 7. You just have to write the correct less than or equal to. So put line underneath because there's a bracket. No line underneath because there's a parentheses. Okay. So this is your inequality. So this one, same thing, right? The inequality and the interval notation. Okay, so it goes up to 1, 2, 3, -1, -2, -3. So write the inequality and the interval notation for this graph here, inequality graph. Okay. So the interval is not too bad. So since they're including it, you just say this, right? So that means everything in between, stop and the endpoints. The inequality, however, would be all x's, x representing all the numbers in between, less than or equal to 3, less than or equal to -3. Right up there. Linear inequality. So far as this makes sense, you guys okay? All right. Solve the inequality and yeah. Still 2.4. question 1. Solve the inequality and graph the solution. Negative 10x is less than or equal to negative 30. All right, so when you're solving for inequalities, or solving for x or whatever, it's all the same rules except when you divide by negative on both sides, or multiply by negative. That's the only difference. So to solve for x here, I have to divide by a negative 10 on both sides. When I do that, I need to flip the inequality symbol to the opposite direction. Okay. So solving these types are all the same as solving for x in an equation. This is the only new thing, or different thing, I should say. Okay. So at this point, interval note. Oh, I guess we could start with the graph, right? That might help. So that's the solution. So this is everything greater than 3 equal to. So I put a bracket and then go all the way forever this way. Right? Now, find the interval notation. So that will be bracket 3, that's where it starts, go on forever. So you never put brackets on infinity. So this is the interval notation. Then write that as a, I guess that was it. This is the inequality, that's the graph, and that's the interval. So on these types, you'll solve for x, graph it, and then put the interval notation. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay.
Whenever you're dividing or multiplying by a positive, does the sign change or just the negative?
Well, these signs will change, right? When you divide by negative, negative, positive.
Yeah. Yeah.
These guys will change, but then you also need to flip the inequality.
So, but I mean, if it was like a 10x, and the 30, or I guess just 10x, not negative 10x.
Yeah, if it was a 10, you would divide by 10, which is positive, so the symbol would not change. The arrow would still stay the same.
Okay, just making sure.
Yeah, that's a good question. It only flips when you divide by negatives or multiply by negatives. Okay. Let's do another one. So you subtract by 9. So 45 minus 9, that's going to be what? 36. Then you divide by 4. Then you get 9. So notice how I did not divide by negative, so it stayed the same. So then the graph will be, I don't know, we can put 9 wherever the heck we want. It's not a big deal. But when x is on the left side, the arrow tells you which way to go. Or you can just read it. X is all the values below or equal to 9. So I will include everything below, right? this direction. So the interval would be negative infinity all the way up until 9 with a bracket. There we go. So this has like an enclosed space. So whatever so you're gonna solve for x, but the x is enclosed in the middle. So basically you isolate x, but when you when you add or divide or whatever, you have to do it to all 3 sides. Okay. So if I add 2, right, I have to add it to every single side. So I do, let's show our work here. +2, +2, +2. Then that gives me a -5 less than x, which is less than 14. See, these 2's canceled. These became 14. That became -5. So now the graph would be, and there's no equal to, so they're all parentheses. So -5 all the way up until 14. And 0 is somewhere in the middle, right? Who cares? Any question about this one? I feel like that's the weirdest one in your homework. Something like that. The interval, I almost forgotten about it. It's getting kind of late now, I'm tired. Interval would be -5 to 14, parentheses.